following is a presentation of Learfield IMG College. From the Georgia Southern Sports Network, powered by Learfield IMG College.
Wings up, Eagle Nation! Touchdown, Georgia Southern!
This is Inside Eagle Nation, your all-access look into Eagle athletics.
Taking a look through all the other action in Georgia Southern athletics this past week. A lot of road action. A lot of teams hitting the old I-16 out of town.
Getting on the steel horse and taking us to parts north, south, west, wherever. Can't really go too much farther east.
Now let's return to the Learfield IMG College studios. Here are your hosts, Colin Lacy and Danny Reed.
That's a fact, Jack.
Welcome into another edition of Inside Eagle Nation, your every Monday night Inside Eagle Nation, episode number 159. Over years, if you add them all together, again, we took that little bit of a break and then had 1 week with but a lot of podcasts, a lot of Georgia Southern talk, a lot of stories. We're going to get into some more stories. You said you have some good ones from your trip up to Kentucky.
Well, I'm just thankful I made this chair because that took forever to get back from Moorhead. We pulled in last Thursday about 7:30 in the morning, and we usually have our local hit on 94.9 from 8 to 9 on Thursdays, and when I was pulling, I was thinking, okay, I'm here.
Yeah, when you text me and said, I just got to the house and I'm on my way to the station, I'm like, go to bed.
No, I didn't say I was on my way to the station. I just said I was
on my way to the station.
Oh, okay.
That's how long it took y'all. Good.
I did think about it, though.
No.
I have a feeling that Brian would have kicked me. Hey, what are you doing here?
Yeah.
We'll talk about that next week. This week, though.
Colin Lacy alongside the voice of the Eagles, Danny Reed. As everything starts to slow down a little bit, Georgia Southern football starting to ramp up. You've got some new coaching hires we'll get to in just a few moments. One of them just coming out in the last minute or so. It's not necessarily a new hire, but a new assignment, I guess you could say.
It is breaking news, though.
It is. Do. We need Chambers for the music. But to start off with, Georgia Southern football had 9 Eagles named to the All-Sunbelt Conference team. Anthony Beck, second-team punter. C.J. Wright, second-team D-line. Had 3 Eagles on the third-team All-Sunbelt pick. Khalil Crowder on the offensive line. Eldrick Robinson at linebacker. Anthony Wilson at safety. And then 4 more on honorable mention. Aaron Dowdell, Justin Ellis, Caleb Hood, and Logan Wright. And you can say, yes, Georgia Southern didn't have any first-team All-Sunbelt picks. You can say 2 just second teams, 9 overall. But a little bit different voting this year that doesn't get publicized as much unless you're talking to Jay Walker. But you were the media voter for Georgia Southern. Most of the time, more often than not, you've got the radio play-by-play guy because it's who sees the team more than anybody else.
Correct.
You were not allowed to vote for Georgia Southern people. Correct. Jay Walker, the radio voice for Louisiana, wasn't allowed to vote for Louisiana people. And so you were not allowed. A lot of times it's commonplace for coaches not to be able to. Media, this is really the first time I've seen it to where you can't vote for your own players on the media side. And we can debate whether that's right or not. I don't think it is, but that's a whole nother podcast for another day. But the fact that a team like Georgia Southern that struggled as much as they did had 9 guys to all Sunbelt teams, I think that really says something when you don't get to go to bat for your own players when you see them more often than not. And especially a guy like Eldrick Robinson, a linebacker.
Sometimes they don't let you vote for your own guys in the preseason.
Right.
So as to not stack it that way, which I guess I get to a degree. But usually you can vote for your guys in the postseason, but for whatever reason, this is the way it was this year. But despite a 3-9 record, to have 9 guys gain postseason laurels, that tells you that talent does exist here, even though it didn't necessarily result in a whole lot more wins. We have lauded the abilities of Anthony Beck and C.J. Wright all year. I thought Beck would get second team because Reese Burns at Louisiana was just a little bit more consistent, but Beck set the school record for single-season punt average, set the single-season school record for punts of 50 yards or more. And every coach that we heard on the teleconference every week when Georgia Southern was playing that team, how are they going to block number 0? How are they going to handle C.J. Wright? Led the team in sacks as a nose.
Yeah.
That does not happen very often.
No, and it was really interesting to see from the time he's got on campus, outside of the couple of times he lined up in the backfield at Clemson, you had seen him at nose the entire time. Towards the end of the season, and it may have been out of necessity with A.J. Watkins going down, but he moved to end, and it doesn't seem like that much of a change unless you really look at what they're doing on the offensive line. The end and nose position are more different than people would think, and for him to be able to move out there and it doesn't become a story, I think kind of talks to the phrase of what he was able to do with it.
Most of the time, offensive tackles are worried about guys going around them. It's all about that speed rush. You put a nose out at end, and then you have to worry about, this guy might actually try to go through me. And CJ could go through a lot more people than he was given credit for. Having to play with the banged-up knee for the final few weeks of the regular season, we didn't think we were going to see him anymore once he got hurt against Coastal. But to battle his way through the way that he did, Justin Ellis was somebody else that was playing hurt for about the final 5 to 6 games of the season. He was dealing with that shoulder injury. Those guys thankfully got to stay in when so many more were out for the year with their injuries. And that's where the defense was. And despite having so many guys out, you did see the improvement over the final few weeks. Now, look, 3-9 is 3-9. But you can't tell me that that unit didn't get better despite having so many major guns out of the lineup.
As you look at the Sun Belt Conference as a whole, the postseason honors, Grayson McCall, Player of the Year for Coastal Carolina. You can kind of debate that one a little bit since the back half of the season. He was hampered with injury, missed a couple of games, wasn't necessarily himself when he came back from injury. Jalen Tolbert, the Offensive Player of the Year from South Alabama, that one kind of surprised me a little bit. I know he's one of the best in the conference, but an Offensive Player of the Year for a team that isn't bowling is kind of interesting. Defensive Player of the Year, Demarco Jackson from Appalachian State, not a whole lot of surprise there. Newcomer of the Year, Appalachian State, Chase Bryce. We'll get there. I know where you're going with that.
Yeah.
Chase Bryce from Appalachian State, the Newcomer of the Year. Freshman of the Year, Montrell Johnson from Louisiana. And Billy Napier, obviously the Coach of the Year from Louisiana. I don't think there was a whole lot of guessing of where that one was going to go.
No, I was good on that one.
But I was kind of surprised by a couple of those. Offensive Player of the Year, like we talked about with Tolbert from South Alabama. I know where you're going for Defensive Player of the Year. Demarco Jackson was good for App State, there's no doubt. I don't know that he's necessarily the Defensive Player of the Year. I'm still going to fight Carlton Marshall for that every single time.
Yeah.
But there was a little bit more of an eyebrow raiser with the postseason laurels than normal, and I wonder if it goes to you're not allowed to vote for your own players.
The hope with Marshall is that he can win the Burlsworth Trophy for the nation's best former walk-on, which I think he has a really good shot to get that. Grant Morgan, who we saw at Arkansas. I know the award generated at Arkansas from Brandon Burlsworth, who walked on as a former Razorback before he unfortunately passed away. So I think from an emotional standpoint, it might go to him, but I really hope that Marshall can win that award. I get why Jackson got it. That's a 10-win App team, and he was the best defensive player on a 10-win App team. But from what I saw in all of our conversations with Barry and everybody else in the league, it hurt a little bit to not see Marshall get rewarded. First team All-League for sure, but in my mind, he was the Defensive Player of the Year.
Yeah. Really the first year that it's kind of been, is that really the Offensive Player of the Year? Is that really the Defensive Player of the Year? And a lot of it goes to, we've talked about the parity in this league for years and years, but I don't know. This was the first year I was kind of like,
Well, Offensive Player of the Year, I don't want to put it this way, but if you take what Jalen Tolbert did against Georgia Southern that Thursday night in Mobile, then absolutely he was the Offensive Player of the Year.
He was the Offensive Player of the Year that night.
He was Offensive Player of the Year with Newcomer of the Year, you automatically think it's got to be a younger guy, but for Chase Bryce, transferred into the league, he's going to come back next year. I don't think that was expected, but he is coming back for 2022. I understand it. He led the league in passing. He was a little bit turnover prone, but not nearly as much as he was the year before at Duke, and then Freshman of the Year. We watched Louisiana play the week before. They were matching up against Ohio on that Thursday night, and that's when Montrell Johnson had his 4-touchdown game. He was Player of the Week that week coming into Statesboro, and just watching him live that night, I'm thinking, oh, that dude is good.
Yeah.
And they had just lost Elijah Mitchell, who's now a starter, possibly a Pro Bowler with the 49ers. Trey Regis going to the Raiders. But Montrell Johnson looks like he is going to be the next big running back for the Cajuns. They announced their new head coach, Mike Desormeaux, taking over, of course, with Billy Napier going to Gainesville. That's an offense that's still going to be tough to handle, even though the regime changes, but I don't think the culture changes
Yeah.
I know that's one of the hashtags that they use, but for Desormeaux, somebody that played there, outstanding career there. That's who Shai Werts broke the record of in terms of QB rushing yards when he did last year against Texas State. He was an assistant there. This seemed logical as to not get away from a continuity.
And that's the bowl game plus full-time head coach now?
He is the guy.
Oh, I missed that.
Yeah,
okay, I thought it was just the interim for the bowl game.
No, he's taken over, and they've got the Arnell Carriers New Orleans Bowl. That should be a really good game against Marshall in him taking over. Similar situation to what Notre Dame is going to deal with. Marcus Freeman taking over with Brian Kelly going to LSU. He's the guy there, and Desormeaux is the guy with the Cajuns now.
This offseason, as far as coaching is concerned, it'll make your head spin. Troy just announcing officially today that their new head coach was under Neil Brown's staff when Neil was at Troy, but I think that's a really good hire for Troy.
The name John Sumrall had been floated for a long time, pretty much ever since Neil Brown left.
Yeah. A lot of people thought he was going to be the successor for Neil Brown.
And that's what I thought too. But credit Chip Lindsey for being able to do what he could. Ultimately, it ended up in 3 straight losing seasons. He was let go before the end of the year. Brandon Hall, the D coordinator, coached the finale against Georgia State. But this was the hire that Troy wanted, but at the same time, the rest of the league didn't, because I think that they know that with him in place, the Brown way of doing things is going to come back into play, and that's going to make Troy immediately dangerous because they just opened their facility not terribly long ago. They have great attendance despite being in such a small area. And with all the new toys that are coming into the league, maybe as soon as next year, saw the announcement that maybe Old Dominion, Southern Miss, and Marshall are going to be joining the league next year. That's not official, but it's being floated. We know that James Madison is working on a waiver to possibly be eligible for Sun Belt games next year. Now, they wouldn't count unless they got their waiver, but
yeah, Georgia Southern knows how waivers go when you're transitioning.
Well, yeah, and I know that's been 7 years now. But depending on who is the one that's going to be signing the paperwork, you could have a much different league in a year as opposed to gearing up for the 23 season when all this was supposed to happen.
You look at what the Sun Belt Conference looks like postseason wise. It'll start on December the 17th, a Friday night, in the Tail Greeter Cure Bowl down at Camping World Stadium in Orlando. It's a 6 p.m. kickoff on ESPN2. Coastal Carolina going back to the Cure Bowl against the MAC champion Northern Illinois.
That's going to be a really good game.
Yeah, I think so. The roofclaim.com Boca Raton Bowl, December 18th, 11 a.m. Rise and shine at FAU Stadium on ESPN as App State will take on Western Kentucky, which we will get to that one meaning a little bit more in a tie-in for Georgia Southern a little bit later.
Yeah.
But that's one a little bit strange. It's not in your usual bowl footprint, but Commissioner Gill talking about it leading into the Sun Belt Conference Championship game. With the way that the deal is structured with ESPN events, normally you would have the Lending Tree Bowl and bowls like that in your normal bowl footprint, but there are opportunities to trade out different ways. This way, App State goes to the Boca Raton Bowl, and you don't have a Sun Belt team in the Lending Tree Bowl down in Mobile this year.
That and the league only having 4 teams forced this flexible kind of arrangement. And I'm very curious to see how that App State defense does against the number 1 passing offense in the country. Bailey Zappi, the former Houston Baptist quarterback.
That's a great name.
He has a chance to throw for 6,000 yards.
Good night.
This year. We talked about Patrick Mahomes a couple of years ago setting the FBS record. It sounds like Zappi's going to have a realistic chance to do that. Now, he did lose both of his offensive coordinators this week, one of which we will talk about here in just a little bit.
You move on later in the day, a lot later in the day, actually, 9:15 kickoff on December the 18th, the R&L Carriers New Orleans Bowl on ESPN inside the Caesars Superdome. Still not used to that. Louisiana will take on Marshall, one of those teams, like you talked about, joining the Sun Belt Conference. Officially, as of right now, it'll be July 2023, but still an opportunity for a July 2022 induction to the Sun Belt Conference coming up later on in, heck, just a couple of months. It's a possibility that you've got Marshall, ODU, and Southern Miss coming into the league, but we'll cover all that when it becomes more official.
I think that is by far the best bowl matchup of the year for the Sun Belt with those two teams going at it. You had a new staff take over in Marshall this year. Charles Huff, the former Alabama staffer, he's got one of the best running backs in the country, and Rashawn Ali. They should have beaten App in Boone on a Thursday night earlier this year, but App scored 10 points in the fourth quarter, and with the Cajuns 12 straight wins to get to 12-1. It could end up being the best season they've ever had, even losing Coach Napier. But how are they going to respond with the guy that I think they wanted all along in Coach Desormeaux?
Yeah.
The final game for Levi Lewis, thankfully for the rest of the league, but they're going to shed some tears down at Acadiana because of all that he has done for them, the all-time leader in touchdown passes for the Ragin' Cajun program. But that is one that's going to have a lot of eyes on it.
Then the final Sun Belt Conference Bowl tie-in, the Tax Act Camellia Bowl on December the 25th, a 2:30 kickoff on Christmas Day on ESPN inside historic Crampton Bowl, Georgia State and Ball State, a Ball State team that Georgia Southern will see coming up next year.
Coming back to Statesboro. And then Georgia Southern will return the trip in 23 going up to Muncie, Indiana.
I feel like we've talked about Ball State more in the last couple of weeks with basketball hosting them. Talking about more about Ball State the last few weeks than I think I have my entire life.
Well, we were talking a little bit about that with their radio guy Joel Gadet because he didn't make the trip for baseball at the start of the 2020 season, which was ended because of COVID after 16 games. That was going to be a 4-game series. Rain made it only 3. Georgia Southern taking all 3 against the Cardinals. They had a really good pitching staff that year, but thankfully Georgia Southern got some well-timed offense to sweep that series, and you've got the home-and-home with football starting, and next year basketball is going to go up to Muncie to return that game after beating Ball State to open this season.
We talked about a fired up FOC over across campus. It's a
probably heard it.
Yeah, starting to get a little bit rolling over there as Brian Ellis named the offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach earlier on today. Touched on it a little bit earlier, or alluded to it a little bit earlier, was the previous offensive coordinator for Western Kentucky the previous 3 years. In 2018, was the quarterbacks coach under Coach Helton at USC, was an assistant quarterbacks coach with Helton when Sam Darnold was there, so he knows a thing or two about quarterbacks. Has also been a wide receivers coach and running backs coach at Western Kentucky, but a Georgia boy from Byron, Peach County, and he put out a video earlier, fired up to get back to the state of Georgia and be able to recruit what he knows.
You know, much like when you hear Coach Helton talk, it sounds like he's the Georgia Southern head coach. It sounds like Brian Ellis is a coach at Georgia Southern.
Yeah.
It was just a small clip about him getting back to what he called God's country, and I think a lot of people would agree with him. He just sounds like he's going to fit here, and how meaningful it is to him and his family to be back here for a program that he has followed so long.
And a lot of people may not know the name as it jumps off the page, but somebody that took over as co-offensive coordinator for Western Kentucky and one of the best offenses, like you talked about a little bit earlier, in the country this year.
Led the league in passing. They're currently second in the country in scoring at better than 42 points per game. They had to rally late against UTSA to make that a game. They end up falling at the end in the Conference USA Championship. One of the nation's best receivers in Jarrett Stearns was one of the 3 that transferred from Houston Baptist, and he probably should be a finalist for the Biletnikoff Award. Ultimately, he did not make that list, but we talked about the shuffling of their OCs before their bowl game coming up. Ellis comes here. Zach Kitley, who was the architect of this air raid scheme, he's going to be the new offensive coordinator at Texas Tech under Sonny Cumbie.
Interesting.
That just got announced earlier today.
Had one earlier on last week. Ryan Smith named the general manager of football for Georgia Southern football. Not a whole lot of places have a general manager. The release said that it's concentration mainly on recruiting. He's been the director of player personnel at Auburn the last couple of years. He's been in recruiting. He's been at player personnel with Mac Brown at UNC and Gus Malzahn at Auburn. So he knows how a big-time program is supposed to be run, both from the player development side, both from the recruiting side. I think he's going to have his hand in a little bit of both of those. Yeah. But a big part of it, especially right now, as you get closer and closer to that December 15th signing day, is going to be really focused on recruiting.
There are positions when you're trying to rush to get to a deadline that you've got to have very early. If you're a head coach, you want your offensive guy, you want your defensive guy, you want your recruiting guy. And it appears that 2 of those 3 are in place, now needing to find a defensive coordinator, but I don't anticipate that's going to take a heck of a long time to get that in place. You just need to find the right person and then be able to hit the ground running until that December the 15th when the early signing day hits.
Also, the one that just came out a few moments ago.
This is the breaking news.
Yeah, kind of. It's not quite breaking news anymore. But Kevin Whitley, we mentioned it earlier last week that he was the only holdover from the previous staff that was going to be on-field coaching. He is going to be the cornerbacks coach again, but also the assistant head coach. One, I think it's a really classy move by Coach Helton to give him the assistant head coaching title, and something that he definitely deserved and has earned. It's not something that's just a token, okay, you were the interim head coach, here's the assistant head coach title. this is one that was 100% earned by Kevin Whitley as well.
Well, you think about what he had to deal with over the final 8 weeks of the season, not to mention what had already happened to the team during camp in those first 4 weeks of the season. But the final 4 weeks of the year with Coach Helton in place, remember, he was in this phase where he was overseeing everything, evaluating everything, and Coach Whitley impressing him enough with the passion that he has for this place, having played here, the national championships. His experience as a high school head coach absolutely helping him to be an assistant here and an interim head coach here. You'd almost be silly not to want someone like that on your staff, and we had a chance to work with him more closely the last few weeks than we did those previous couple of years. I think this is going to be a really good thing for Georgia Southern.
So as of right now, the staff for Georgia Southern football, obviously Clay Helton taking over as the head coach of Georgia Southern football. You've got the offensive coordinator and Brian Ellis also going to be working with the quarterbacks. Kevin Whitley on cornerbacks on the defensive side as the assistant head coach as well. And then Ryan Smith named the general manager of football. And I would expect over the next couple days you start to see more and more signings coming through and figure out who is going to be where, and you're going to start to see a staff. Really, I think you're going to have the bulk of the staff in by signing day, would be my guess.
And
or at least announced.
Well, the funny thing about it is I don't know if they're going to get to see their offices before they can actually go recruit. It might be one of those, are you coming? Are we going to do this? Good. All right, go here and see this kid. You're on my staff now. Just where we are now with the signing day, we were 9 days from it.
Yeah.
Guys are putting pen to paper to come to this program, and it's good for places like this so they don't get poached by top programs with that February period, but you've also got to deal with what a lot of schools are dealing with now because of nearly 25 coaching turnovers.
Yeah.
Is you got to get that new staff in place, somehow find a comfort level, and be able to learn what you need and work that within the overall framework of a Georgia Southern.
And I think it goes back to, and we've talked about it a couple of times, and people might be tired of us talking about it, but it's a podcast, so we talk about what we want to.
That's what we do.
But you have the hiring of Coach Helton 4 weeks still to go in the regular season. We talked about it speeding up the process of getting a staff in place, and it doesn't really hit you of how much of a benefit that is until I was listening to Coach Napier's press conference at Florida, and people were talking about the December signing period, what his plans were, and he's not looking to sign many, if any, guys in December just because when you go and recruit something, and I think he put it pretty well, when you recruit a guy, it's not just you trying to find a fit for your program. It's them trying to fit what they need in their football life, and does your program fit that? And so if you don't have the guys there to say, okay, this is who's going to be coaching you, this is it, there's not a whole lot of recruiting you can really do. But since you've had Coach Helton, his vision for this program for the last month now, he's been able to go out recruiting. There have been a couple of people that have been able to go out recruiting with him as well. You've had a little bit of a jump start on it to where you can make this December signing day meaningful and really get the guys in that you need going into 22, and you're not having to wait to see, like Coach Napier said, what's left when you get to February and have to go to the portal.
The comforting thing is if you can find alignment, and we've heard that word a lot from Jared, from Chris, from Coach Helton, it's that alignment with Dr. Marrero. If you're aligned from top to bottom, then you don't have to acclimate yourself. You just get it because you all see things the same way.
Yeah.
Now, that is going to depend a little bit on how long an individual player has been recruited, because if they've been told something for 2 or 3 years, then all of a sudden there's a new staff coming in and trying to maybe say that, but maybe do it in their own way. It can be a little off-putting, but if there's alignment and there's purpose and direction, that's going to help that individual make the decision. That's why you're seeing so many guys that have verbaled back off of that with staffs changing, because they just don't know what it's going to look like under a new regime. It's not that they still don't want to go to a place. It's just that they need to hear the right things so Coach Helton or whoever it is can get to know them, but they can get to know Coach Helton and whoever it is. That's where the alignment takes place, so you can ultimately figure out what this program is going to look like. Not this team necessarily, but what this program is going to look like going forward.
Going to be fun over the next week and a half or so when you get to that December 15th signing day to see what the signing class looks like, and by then I think you'll have a more solid idea of what the staff looks like inside that FOC as well. Diving into basketball a little bit, Georgia Southern women's basketball, because of exams tail end of last week, beginning of this week, because the semester started on a Wednesday, I think, Wednesday or Thursday, middle of the week, whatever it was. exams started in the middle of the week. That's why you guys had to bus back from Moorhead, Kentucky. We'll get to that in a minute. Easy. I didn't mean to bring up any bad memories.
Night. There wasn't a whole lot of night on the bus.
But Georgia Southern women's basketball took on the College of Charleston last Tuesday, got the 85-65 victory over the CFC Cougars, the front end of a doubleheader where College of Charleston men was taking on Tulane. But Georgia Southern got out to a 19-9 start after the first quarter and really didn't let up. College of Charleston tried to scratch back. It was pretty much a 20-point game the entirety of the game. There was a couple of minutes there in the third quarter where CFC cut it down to single digits, but Georgia Southern able to extend it in the fourth quarter and get the 20-point victory over College of Charleston. Maya Burns was really good, 10 points, and then 17 points coming from Taryn Ward with 5 rebounds as well. She knocked down a big three towards the tail end to kind of seal that one up.
What's the word? Excitabulous? Was that the word?
Excitabulous, and that proves that people listen to this podcast, I promise you. Coach Howard talked about it on the podcast before we made the trek over to Auburn, that it was Excitabulous, and now there's a shirt for it. University store coming and watching and saying, hey, we need that shirt.
Good look.
And so now you have the shirt. I wonder if I was going to say I wonder if she'll coach in it, but that's not the style for Coach Howard.
She has style.
Yes, 100%.
We know she's got the style.
The most stylish coach in the Sun Belt, maybe the country.
You have a morning game coming up, don't you?
Oh, we're going to get there.
Because maybe that could be the one.
That's true. Next game up for Georgia Southern, they'll take on a Gardner-Webb Running Bulldogs squad. And they make sure to tell you, don't say Bulldogs. It's Running Bulldogs.
Saw them to start the football season.
Yep. But a 2-6 team out of the Big South, and it's a little bit skewed. It's scoring margin at -16, but it's a team that played Georgia, played a lot of Power 5s at the beginning of the season, so their first 3 games against all Power 5 teams, and it didn't go their way, obviously. So the numbers are a little bit skewed, but a 2-6 Gardner-Webb team that was picked right in the middle of the Big South Conference that has expanded this year as well. But going to be a 2 o'clock tip-off on Saturday. That'll be the same day Georgia Southern men's basketball will head up to Mercer to take on the Mercer Bears. But then on Monday, you get an 11 a.m. tip against Carver College, who has only had a program for 3 years now. And, of course, it is field trip day at Hanner. Talked to Cameron Bastion earlier on this, I think it was yesterday, actually. And it's going to be about 2,500 right now. He said there's a possibility for more. 2,500 field trip day participants.
You will not, I repeat, not need a crowd mic.
No, and that will definitely be... See, normally when we... I guess I can't turn. But normally when we do games, you have one ear off just so you can kind of hear what's going on. That'll be definitely a both ear on type of game.
You might need to talk to Gata Productions to see if you can just do it from offsite.
No, I did that once. That was a good decision, but no. But you've got Gardner-Webb and Carver both at home this weekend in a roundabout way. Saturday, 2 o'clock tip-off against Gardner-Webb, and then 11 a.m. tip-off against Carver coming up on Monday.
So you get a chance to talk directly about that game on next week's edition of Inside Eagle Nation.
Yeah, if it's still going... I'll be over here. Trust me.
You will not still be going.
No.
Unless they're still trying to get the kids out of the arena.
No, I'll be gone. Hit that little door at the end of the runway, and we're out of here.
And I'm gone.
What's that step? Georgia Southern men's basketball made the long trek up to Moorhead, Kentucky. Made the trek on Tuesday, but played on Wednesday night, fell 59-51. It's a game that Georgia Southern led in that game, but a really good Moorhead State team.
Yeah.
And Coach Berg talked about it after the game. You're on a 3-game losing streak, but all against really quality opponents. Started against Wofford, fell in that one in the tail end of that multi-team event up in Spartanburg. And then Georgia Tech had a 14-point lead in that one, ended up losing by 2. But Moorhead State, 59-51 on their floor, all of those on the road. All of those really good opponents, and now you look to get things right coming up.
The biggest margin up until about 10 minutes left in the game was 7 points. Georgia Southern didn't have a lead bigger than 2, but they did make a run in the second half to take a 1-point lead after a Prince Toyambi bucket, and they had done such a good job in the post defending against the preseason OVC Player of the Year in Janai Broom. He had 2 points in the first half, didn't take his first field goal attempt until there was about 5.5 minutes on the clock. So Georgia Southern, whether he didn't catch it at all or he caught it, just was uncomfortable, could not get into his game. But because of some turnovers in the second half, Morehead State got into transition. The look started to be a little bit easier. He scored 10 straight points at one point during a 22-5 run. But credit the Eagles. They got down 16. They ended up coming back. They got it down to 7, but never got any closer. These are games that are going to pay them dividends down the line. We're seeing the kind of games that Georgia Southern's going to play. They've been in the 50s for the last 3. Should have beaten Georgia Tech. They know that. Georgia Tech knows that.
Yeah.
Even though Michael DeVoe was sick, he still scored 26 that game. But you're seeing what they can do against primary performers. DeVoe's got a chance to be an All-American this year if he keeps scoring 26 points per game. He had a great game against North Carolina the other night in a loss. Broom's going to be a first-team All-OVC guy. He has a double-double waiting to happen. The difference, though, was their ability to rebound offensively. He had 16 offensive rebounds, and it just seemed that those that happened came at the worst possible times when Georgia Southern was finally generating some offensive momentum, just couldn't stay consistent enough on that half of the floor. I'll give a lot of kudos to Elijah McCadden, though. Last 2 games, he's been really aggressive offensively, came up with 17 points in that game. And even though we flew out, we bust back because of the travel, and I'm going to guess that we don't bus home again from Morehead, Kentucky. Had a sleeper bus for the guys, but let's just say we probably won't bus home again from Morehead, Kentucky.
Not what you were looking for on a Wednesday night?
Well, I'm curious to see what Morehead does next year because they're making the trip to Statesboro for the first time ever. Now, we flew out but had to come back on bus.
Right.
And
so you got the best of both worlds.
See, I'm going to guess that Morehead could have fly it both ways.
Yeah.
Because you're about an hour from Lexington. You're about 2 hours from Louisville, so you can fly into either. Fortunately for Georgia Southern, the flights they had to take on Tuesday were short. But by the time the game was over and you realize, oh, we've got 10 hours to get home, and when you pull in at 7:30, it's a different part of the body clock that you weren't anticipating.
Okay, you've teased it ever since you got back. You said you had stories, good ones.
Got some stories. All right.
Play.
Number one, on the plane ride up, it was Andrei Savrasov's 21st birthday.
Oh.
So one of the flights, he was sitting next to me. We were in the very back of the plane. It felt like I was flying with Georgia Southern football. Anyway, with Savrasov, he said that his parents are able to listen to all the games back in St. Petersburg because ESPN Plus does not function over there. So they listen to every game.
Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
That's just what he had told me. He said, you know what? They listen to every game. They don't know what you're saying. It's like, well, that's not. They just hear a Savrasov, and they know that their son's doing well. But I told him, all right, here's what I'm going to do. Since I know that your family listened to every game, we're going to try to work some Russian words into every game. So I've been brushing up on some Russian the last about week or so.
Have you gotten Russian words in?
I didn't get a chance to against Morehead.
Okay, because I was about to say, I was in the studio and I either wasn't paying attention or missed it.
You will hear at least 2 Russian words for Carver on Wednesday.
That's fantastic.
So usually with baseball, you got to learn a little bit of Spanish.
Right.
Working with so many Latin American players. I took French in high school, which have not had much of a need for that.
Right.
It just seemed different, but everybody else took Spanish. I thought French sounded interesting, but I'm going to see how much Russian we can learn basketball-wise over the next couple months.
So is this just random words or is it something that you're going to use like during the call?
Yeah, if it's okay.
Like during the play, not just when we're yucking it up.
No, I'm not going to just pick out a random word from the Russian dictionary. This is actually going to be something within the rhythm of a game. If he scores, if he gets a great stop, something like that.
Okay, well, good. Because if I'm doing the game with you, don't talk Russian to me because I won't get it.
I'm curious to see what you look like when some of these come out, though, because it's been nice. And I've asked Andre, because some of them, they get colloquialized and they don't translate the same way because we would say, oh, an and one.
Right.
Well, I don't think there's a word for and one in Russian.
Yeah, like Spanish, it wouldn't be a y uno.
Correct.
Yeah, I
But
gotcha.
talking with him and getting some of the ideas of what I could say that would come off. And
So this is a group project.
This has been a little bit, and we had about 45 minutes on the flight to get to Charlotte. So we tried to map this out a little bit. Had a really nice conversation. Andre's such a great kid. Talking about some of his own language limitations after coming to Lubbock, where he had spent, I think, 9 years of schooling just to try to get a little bit of English incorporated into his vocabulary. But he said his first 3 months in Lubbock taught him more than what he learned the previous 9 years of schooling in Russia.
That's what I've said. I took 4 years of Spanish in high school, I think. Maybe 3 or 4 years. Doesn't matter. But I spent a week 2 different times in the Dominican on a mission trip. I learned more in those 2 weeks than I did in 3 years in school. Not even close.
It's just the kind of experiences you can have, the real-life experiences. A textbook can give you a way to look at certain structured sentences where you go here, you go there, but to live it and to hear your other teammates talk and to gain some comfortability there, I think really helped him. And he said he still has some trouble with some things language-wise, but speaking with him, you really wouldn't know it. He's got the accent, the Russian accent, but you never would know that he struggles with his language. But
that's awesome.
Part number 2,
okay.
One of Georgia Southern's great student managers, David Stallion, who's been with the program the last 3 years, he had never flown before.
Oh, these are always great
These are
stories.
always, we talked
These
about...
are always fantastic.
2017, we talked about Raymond Johnson going to Indiana. That's a great story in and of itself. But on the second flight, going from Charlotte out to Lexington, the flight leader got on the intercom and said, "Would David Stallion please hit his call button?" So we're all...
That's never good.
Oh, so he hits his call button, walk back, and they presented him with his own pair of wings because it was his first flight.
How did they know?
Come on.
I mean, obviously, yeah, somebody had to tell him, but that's interesting.
Well, somebody on the way by, I don't know who it was, but said, "Hey, it's this guy's first flight. You might mess with him a little bit." But it was really cool. They gave him his own set of wings. It was neat.
Nice.
Part 3.
Wow, how many parts do we have?
This all, look, when you go to Moorhead, things happen.
Apparently, good night.
We're waiting to get on the second flight to go to Lexington.
This is all on the way.
Yeah, this is all the way. On the way home, we're not going to go there. But on the way out, the second flight, as we're waiting to connect in Charlotte, a lot of the guys were on standby and they needed their seat assignments. And we're sitting there in the terminal waiting for when they opened up the seat assignments. So the guy finally got on the intercom and said, "Passengers Keller, Reed, Sabrasov, Berg, Shoemate." And he got to Getty.
Yeah, I was about to say, I can tell you which one this one is.
And he just went, whew. "Passenger JUOC." The whole terminal just busted out. He walks up. I wish that was the first time that had happened.
That's fantastic.
But you had about 12 to 15 people going up to the desk at the same time, and everybody's just laughing at Getty's his way up. It was good. It was fun.
Is that it?
That's it.
Wow, you got 3 stories on the ride or the way up to Moorhead, Kentucky.
Yeah, the ride back, thankfully it was dark. But, see, I've been on a sleeper bus to come home before. I think it was 2011 when I was at the Citadel. We were coming home from Chattanooga and won that night. But it's about a good 8 to get from Chattanooga back to Charleston. We didn't pull in until about 4 in the morning, and right as we were getting off the highway, you've been on the sleeper buses where some of the couches and overhangs, they just turn into beds.
Right.
You got to work them a certain way. So our strength coach was passed out. He was done for hours. We make a turn to get towards campus. He's on the bottom, falls right out of the bed onto the floor, woke up.
We had one, this was when men's and women's had double headers. And it was the crazy year where we would go from
The Thursday, Saturday, Monday. Yeah.
It was
You were
awful.
Thursday, Saturday. We were Saturday,
No.
Monday.
This is still when it was still Thursday, Saturday for both, but we would go from like Arkansas to Mobile on a Thursday,
Okay,
Saturday.
that was 14. That was first year.
And so women's basketball was playing on a sleeper bus, or we're going to have a sleeper bus. I think it was home from Louisiana because they played at like 2. Men didn't play till like 8, and for whatever reason. So the women are on a sleeper bus out in Louisiana. Well, to get to the arena, everybody has to ride the sleeper bus. It's not necessarily ideal, but
The front part feels like a diner, and the back part feels like where you actually do the sleeping.
the back part, you've got bunks piled on top of each other, probably 3, maybe 4 high.
Yeah.
The front is almost like an RV where you've got like a fold-out table that will pull out to a bed. You've got a couch that pulls out to a bed. So it's not necessarily ideal for just riding.
Yeah.
We're going to the arena. This is when Mark Janak is still on the women's side,
Right.
and Chris Vozab's the head coach.
I think you've told me this one.
Him and Coach Vozab were sitting across the way on like the couch. Well, the sleeper van that the sleeper bus that we had, the pull-out table wouldn't go back. And so the table was about shoulder high, but it was a permanent bed at this point. There was no folding it back down to a table. Well, all the other seats are taken. I'm not going to go lay in a bunk for a 5-minute ride to the arena, so I just hop up on top of the table. Well, I don't know what turn this bus driver found, but it was the sharpest turn in Lafayette, Louisiana, and I just about fell into Mark Janek's lap.
Hey, Colin. What you doing?
Yeah, that's how that went. That's my sleeper bus story. That's all I got.
We will check with Morehead State next year to figure out if...
Yeah, we might have them on the podcast if they took a sleeper bus.
I had a chance to meet their longtime radio voice, Chuck Mraz, real cool guy. We talked a little bit about Samford because they were in the Ohio Valley before they moved to the SoCon. Right before 2008 is when Samford joined the SoCon, so we had some things to talk about there, and we talked a little bit about their baseball. Mick Aoki's the head coach out there, used to be at Notre Dame and Boston College, and
I didn't know that.
Their football is Pioneer League, but formerly they were scholarship, but they made the transition to non-scholarship a little bit ago, and with Pioneer League, just how that league is spread all across the country. You got to go to San Diego, to Butler, Davidson's Pioneer League, but real nice guy, and hopefully he'll make the trip next year so we can show him Statesboro.
Eagles look forward to a matchup against Carver College coming up on Wednesday night, 7 o'clock the tip-off later on this week on Saturday. Georgia Southern will head up to the Mid-State to take on the Mercer Bears, 2 o'clock the tip-off from Hawkins Arena on Saturday.
I just thought about something.
Oh, no.
Okay, we'll get to it, but we played a team from Atlanta last year twice, and it wasn't Georgia State. We played them in 5 days.
It's fantastic.
That's the COVID year. You want to know some COVID year stories? Playing Carver twice in 5 days is a COVID story.
This is a Carver team from the NCCAA.
Yep.
It's a team that has had struggles like you would not believe. 0-12 this year after they just lost to North Alabama last night, 103-40. They're 0-12 this year. Their last win came against Savannah State back on November 23rd, 2019. They've lost their last 45 games. It's been 746 days since they've won a game. The last 5 years, they're 3-91. It has been struggle upon struggle, but it's what they have to do to be able to maintain a program and be able to support the university as well, of getting a lot of Division I games, a lot of games that you go in and essentially you're looking for a paycheck. But at the end of the day, it's a game like this, if you're Georgia Southern, trying to snap a 3-game losing skid. Again, those are against really quality opponents, but get back on the winning way, work out a couple of things that you need to against a Carver team.
In those 2 games last year, one in Statesboro, 192-27, and then they were added very late to that multi-team event down in Miami against FIU, and there's a really good story about that, which we'll tell during the broadcast on Wednesday. It originally was supposed to be Georgia Southern, FIU, and Fort Lauderdale, but Fort Lauderdale didn't gain its accreditation status to be eligible, so it would count towards overall statistics. And we didn't know when that would come through, so they were booted from the tournament. Carver decides to take the trip down because they were at Stetson the day before.
That's right.
And then they come over. They end up playing what was Georgia Southern's second game in 2 days. Then they stayed down there and played the back half against FIU in the 3-team, multi-team event. Their head coach, Brian Spencer, said, look, we know we're going to take our alums, but this is how they're trying to elevate the profile of their program, because now that everybody is on some streaming platform, an E+, a YouTube, a Stadium, a whatever, so they're getting seen.
Yeah.
They're not performing well, but they're getting a lot of paychecks because they're playing so many Division I teams. They're taking their alums, but they're elevating their program. They don't have a huge enrollment, and they have to do this in the front half of the season because since they don't have a dual affiliation with either D2 or NAIA, they are independent, so they've got to go get their own games.
Yeah.
There's not a specific division or conference that they can schedule until after January. So that's why a year ago they played 17 games in a month, all against D1 teams. Nobody in the country had a schedule like this.
No, and if somebody really wanted to, this would be a great 30 for 30 following this program. Think of the Last Chance U EMCC, but their travel is unreal. You look at some of the back-to-backs they have, like they play at Hanner on Wednesday night, 7 o'clock tip-off, then they turn around and go to North Carolina Central, 7 o'clock tip-off the next night.
Yeah.
Some of the back-to-backs they've had are unreal. I'm fascinated by this program. Absolutely fascinated by it. Because it's one that we've talked about, 745-plus days since they won a game, but it's a team that comes in and you wouldn't... They're not a team that comes in with a 6'7" guy and it doesn't necessarily look the part in shoot-around, but those guys that are on the floor go through everything that the same time Georgia Southern's doing. They go through warm-ups just like it was any other team. They go through the game like it's any other team, and it's not you see a quit in this team, which is for losing your last 45, that's something to be said. I am absolutely fascinated with this program.
The closest game they've played since the start of last year was 35 points, but they actually believe that eventually they are going to knock off a Division I team.
Yeah, and when they do, you want to talk about a celebration? My goodness.
Yeah, they believe it's going to happen, but at the same time, if they can make some money, if they can improve the profile of a very small Bible-based school, they have less than 70 students in the entire institution located up in South Fulton. If they can somehow have a positive impact on their institution through this, if they can actually gain a little bit of traction, there is a future for that program. It's going to it's going to take a lot to get it there, but this isn't something where they're just giving these guys a dream come true by getting a chance to play the Division I team in their state. Because they're playing everybody in the Southeast.
Yeah, they don't care.
And think about the players they're getting recruited here. They're not playing other Christian schools. They're playing a full D1 schedule.
Yeah.
They really see what they can do against guys that they feel like they should be playing with anyway.
I saw a note that last year in the COVID year, you talked about all the crazy scheduling they had to do. They played more D1 games than some D1 programs.
Yeah. And they did it in a month.
Yeah.
They played 17 games in 34 days.
That's unreal.
All against Division I teams, whereas we're talking about games against a Bob Jones, against a Covenant that's coming up the following Saturday after Mercer. They're scheduling up and then some.
Yeah.
With everybody they get.
It's unreal. I am fascinated with this program. I love it.
Because you said they did beat Savannah State, and that's not all that long ago, so it's proof that right night / wrong night for whoever you're looking at, it could mean their program.
Yeah, for sure. Because you want to talk about that story getting picked up, and if you're Georgia Southern, you've got to make sure it's not you. It's not just roll out there and... Because if you just roll out there and overlook it, the team that rolls out there and overlooks it, the one that's going to get beat by Carver, and that is going to be on every national headline.
What I will say, Georgia Southern is 5-0 all time against them, but 11 years ago, when Carver came here for the first ever meeting, it was just a 91-83 win.
Yeah.
That was very close for comfort in a game that should have been a 60 to 70 point blowout.
Yeah.
So they get hot from three, start turning the ball over, and I guarantee you that's what Brian Berg is telling this team in the locker room. Look, they should dominate this game. They should absolutely dominate the game. But if mentally they're still thinking about 3 straight losses and thinking about the 2 victories from last year, it might just be the night where Carver figures it out.
This is one you should dominate, but you've got to make sure you do handle your business. And I think we talk about that almost every time we play Carver. Make sure you handle your business, because if not, it's a real bad day.
And I'd rather have confidence in doing what I'm supposed to do in this one, because I've got a rivalry game in Mercer on Saturday. And look, they're not in the same conference anymore, but it's the most played rivalry in Georgia Southern history. This is one I look forward to every year because I think they should play every year.
Yeah, I love this matchup, and we've talked about it a lot. Georgia Southern and Mercer, there's been some really good games both here and at Hawkins Arena up in Mercer.
An arena that I absolutely love. I think it's perfect. Perfect arena.
Perfect for the size, perfect with what they do. I really like this game, and we've talked about it time and time again. It should be a game every year, and for the last few years it has been. Especially
since both teams have so much trouble scheduling in the non-conference because they've both been good. And you'd almost think, well, can they pull off a home and home every year? Because that way Mercer would get a game, Georgia Southern would get a game. Each would get a positive out of the exchange instead of Georgia Southern going to Macon one year and then them coming to Statesboro another year. But this will be the first time the Eagles have gone to Hawkins since that victory in 2018.
But it'll be a 7 o'clock tip-off against Carver on Wednesday, 2 o'clock to tip-off in Macon on Saturday against Mercer. Again, Georgia Southern will take on Gardner-Webb on Saturday as well. That'll be a 2 o'clock tip-off from here inside Hanner Fieldhouse. Chad Jackson and I will have the women's game. Danny and I will have the game on Wednesday starting at 6:30 with the Cutwater Spirits countdown to tip-off. Danny will be solo up in Macon on Saturday for that one as well. But a busy week for basketball. 3 different games between Georgia Southern men's and women's. We'll also keep our eye on what happens over at the Ted Smith Family Football Operations Building as starting to see more and more staffers come in. Again, you've got Brian Ellis, the offensive coordinator for Georgia Southern, being announced earlier today. Kevin Whitley, the assistant head coach and cornerbacks coach, kind of had his role assigned. And then you have Ryan Smith as well, the GM for football. So a lot of bright things along the horizon for Georgia Southern, and we will continue to bring them to you every Monday night here on Inside Eagle Nation Live on Facebook Live. And then about 15, 20 minutes, depending on how fast the internet is down here, it'll be up on all the podcasting platforms.
For not having any games to play until next fall, to know that a new staff is coming in, signing day, spring practice, that's what's going to generate a whole lot of excitement because what's the team going to look like? But for a program that's coming off of 3-9, reasons to be positive are the reasons that you want to talk about.
No, and we'll get Coach Helton on the podcast coming up in the next few weeks, but he is a little bit busy right now with recruiting and getting his staff.
Things. He's doing some things.
Yeah, he's got plenty going on right now. That
we'll get him.
This is the least of his worries.
We'll get him.
As it should be, but we'll get him on in the next couple of weeks, get Jared on in the next couple of weeks to talk about Georgia Southern athletics when it kind of gets into the dead period as far as nothing on campus. Student athletes are off of campus outside of basketballs, but we will get all those together in the next few weeks. But until this weekend, for the voice of the Eagles, Danny Reed, this is Colin Lacy saying so long, everybody.
You've been listening to Inside Eagle Nation, powered by Learfield, the official podcast of Georgia Southern Athletics.